evening, and welcome to Dizzy's Jazz at Lincoln Center. My name is Patty Prasadarao, and I'm the booking assistant for Todd Marcus Jazz. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about what you're going to experience tonight, set the stage for you. Todd Marcus is a composer, arranger, band leader, bass clarinet artisan, and his music has been growing over the years, and we get to experience a new album tonight, a Quintet album called On These Streets, A Baltimore Story. What you're going to learn about Todd Marcus tonight is that he doubles by day as a community activist. And this album, On These Streets, tells a little bit of the story of the neighborhood where both Todd and I live. It's a community in West Baltimore called Sandtown. Many of you might have never heard of our neighborhood. A few years ago, our neighborhood hit the national news when a community member and resident named Freddie Gray was killed in police custody. There was a civil unrest that arose in our neighborhood and around Baltimore after that and highlighted many of the challenges that our neighborhood has faced. Todd will explain a little bit more about that and where the music comes from. But the music actually seeks to show you both the joys and the challenges of life in Sandtown. We also want to let you know that there will be something a little unusual tonight in the performance. Before a few of the numbers, you will hear an interlude, an audio interlude, that sets the stage for the song that you're about to hear and gives you a little bit of context for the song. So with that, I welcome the band to the stage, Todd Marcus Quintet, for On These Streets, A Baltimore Story.
everyone. Great to be here with you. We're going to keep the music going and introduce Mr. Paul Bollenback on guitar. Paul Bollenback. Thank you very much, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you, and very special to be presenting this music that merges two halves of my life. I had a little bit of a later start on jazz, and it was in 1995. I had grown up in New Jersey, moved down to Baltimore, started volunteering in what would become my neighborhood, Sandtown, Winchester, on the west side of town. And met a lifelong resident who had stayed when so many others had left. And amidst the challenges, and he had started a nonprofit, and I started working with him, and over these past 20 years, we've been able to establish Intersection of Change, a community nonprofit in our neighborhood, dealing with poverty-related challenges in our community. And we have a recovery program for our ladies overcoming addiction. We have an arts program. We have a farm that offers employment for citizens coming back from incarceration. And it is these challenges that are dominant in our neighborhood, not the only thing. And so this album was an effort to try, after the unrest, after Freddie Gray brought our community to national attention and just reinforce existing stereotypes, a chance to give a little bit of a balanced picture as an artist has an opportunity to do. And so the first composition we started out with was called On the Corner, and it's one that captures kind of that fun bounce, the hustle and bustle of the street, a lot of our streets. And we're very fortunate that the great Gary Barth wrote liner notes for the album, and he's from Baltimore originally and grew up in the neighborhood, and so it was very personal to have him share his thoughts. And he commented on that too, and he said, you know, I remember back in the day, and streets of Sandtown on the corner typifies how you kind of go almost like a Middle Eastern country. My father is Egyptian, and think about, you know, you can go out to these corners and find a little merchant, it's somehow just a small little shop, and he's got everything. And kind of that same vibe, you know, maybe someone selling CDs, maybe something a little more. And, you know, so we capture the energy. Our second composition we just closed with is called Fear of the Known. A little bit of a play on the phrase fear of the unknown. But in our community, it is the challenges, the poverty-related conditions that our community members know all too well. And we're going to continue into this next composition, and it's going to feature some of these recorded interludes from the album. And in this one, you hear one of our councilmen who spoke the night of the unrest after Freddie Gray's funeral. And it really speaks for itself, and I thought was such an eloquent capturing of complex materials. You're going to hear the actual voice of a reporter that was in our community asking him questions, kind of egging him on with a lot of the negative stereotypes, and his response is profound. And it's going to lead into this composition, which is called Ground Zero at Penn and North. Now, Penn and North is Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue, where the CVS was that got set on fire, that so many were fixated on in the national media. But folks don't know that the days leading up to that tragedy, we had lots of peaceful protests and demonstrations throughout Baltimore City. And the days after that, at this same intersection, we had artists, musicians, folks from our community, from outside our community, coming together in celebration and peaceful demonstrations, trying to raise a voice to the issues that are so much at play in our community of Sandtown, Winchester, and frankly, as you'll hear in this commentary on the recorded audio, is very much an America issue.
It's interesting, Steve. If you come over here, there are a couple of gentlemen in suits that may be worth us talking to. We're going to cross the street here and talk to this gentleman. Hi, how you doing, sir?
I'm good.
I'm reporting here. Are you from Baltimore?
We are. I'm a city councilman in the district.
You're a city councilman here. As you're watching this, tell me what this means for your city. When you're watching this go on, does it break your heart to see this happen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, what it is, these young boys, the young folks in this community showing decades old of anger and frustration for a system that's failed them. I mean, it's bigger than Freddie Gray. This is about social economics in poor urban America. And these young guys are frustrated and upset, and unfortunately, they're displaying it in a very destructive manner. You know, when folks are undereducated, unfortunately, they don't have the same intellectual voice to express it the way that other people are doing, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the violence today.
We just watched this liquor store being looted, and there's a bunch of folks running in and out of there. What's wrong with them? The police are all the way down there. You're a city councilman, is that right?
Is it right for people to loot? No. I mean, I think you've missed, like, everything I've tried to articulate.
Okay, all right, help me understand.
What I said is everything out here has happened is wrong. The violence is wrong. It's not acceptable. Understanding that it's a symptom of something going on here. And what I'm trying to articulate to you is we look at communities like this in urban America, and we see lack of education, we see lack of commercial development, lack of opportunities. It's the social economics of it. It has nothing to do with this corner or West Baltimore. This could occur anywhere in socially economically deprived America.
Thank you, everyone. As I said, one of the things that was important for me to do was to share our strengths and beauties as a community. Because our media is trying to sell papers or internet clicks, and the negative stuff sells, right? And I feel fortunate, having lived in my neighborhood 20 plus years now, having been embraced, and had the chance just to see those positives, experience those positives, to cherish them. And counter to the negative stereotypes, folks don't realize that we yet have these beautiful things in our community. The sense of community that is so strong. I grew up in New Jersey, just the other side of the George Washington Bridge. You know, folks waved to each other when they drove by the street, but you didn't have that sense of knowing each other deeply like I've experienced in Sandtown. And that sense of community is a strong thing that is special. Something that I also cherish is that as musicians, we come home oftentimes late at night, and it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, depending where we're coming from. And I love pulling in, and it's quiet. Even in our neighborhood and throughout the city, just quiet. And there's a train that runs through town, through Baltimore, and it makes me nostalgic of one that did the same about a mile from our house growing up in New Jersey. And you could hear it coming in the distance, blowing the horn at crossings, and then rumbling for miles and miles that went away. And so that same quality in my neighborhood in Baltimore, and actually that train runs underneath my house, one of them too, so I can feel it rumbling too. And but it's beautiful. It's a stillness, it's a tenderness that makes me nostalgic, obviously. And so we hope you enjoy this next composition, which is called It Still Gets Still. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We have one more to play for you, but I want to tell you a little bit about these wonderful musicians. On guitar, a gentleman that I've had the chance to see for a number of years, and he was he was living in D.C. for a number of years, but I didn't know him then. I kind of knew the legacy of him, and I would hear on occasion, Paul Bollenback stopped by Columbia Station. I said, oh, wow. So I heard the whispers, and then I got to hear some of his recordings, got to start meeting him when he was teaching at Peabody in Baltimore. Would come by a jam session I would lead, and then worked up the nerve to say, hey, would you be into doing some of these performances? And he said yes, and it's probably 2-3 years now that we've been making music together, and something that I remember some folks in Baltimore saying, some wonderful musicians, they call him I think the jazz assassin or something like that, where just any setting, and the musicianship and the playing just brings the music to another level. Please welcome Paul Bollenback on guitar. Paul Bollenback. Another musician whose playing is integral to what you hear us shaping and building on this bandstand, not just with the ensemble parts, but the collective improvisation amongst the rhythm section, in addition to his beautiful solos. He's an accomplished band leader, much in demand sideman, an educator as well. Similar situation where I had heard him on records for years, then reached out and kind of very tentatively asked him if he would do some work, and he said yes. And you go from hearing folks on records to getting to know them. You're a little nervous at first. That he has really been one of the warmest, nicest musicians that I've gotten to meet, and glad to be a colleague with him now. Mr. Bruce Barth on piano. Bruce Barth. Now this project is very Baltimore-centric, as you hear. And one of the things that was important to me was that the musicians be from Baltimore or intimately tied to Baltimore. And this gentleman is an example of that. I didn't realize until a few years into our knowing each other how much so he was connected to the neighborhood that I've called home for the last 25 years. We did a performance, it was a little community thing down the street at Shake and Bake. Any of you New Yorkers come down and hang out at Shake and Bake? Bowling, roller skating, Pennsylvania Avenue, Baltimore? And he said, man, I haven't been here in years. I said, here in years? Like, you doing gigs here often? Or like, and he said, no, I had my birthday party here years ago. And I, for the first time knowing each other for years, had a chance to find out that he grew up right in the neighborhood. He released an album of his, I think just last year, and some of the cover imagery of him at a bus stop and playing in front of a corner with a shop in the background right around the corner. So in addition to his amazing playing, I value that connection to our community. His dad is an amazing educator. His family has a long, rich history, and he is an amazing bassist. Please welcome Mr. Kris Funn. Kris Funn on the bass. And last but certainly not least, gentlemen that I've had the chance and the joy to make music with the most of all these gentlemen on the stage. I like to tell the story about when I first got into the music, and I remember I was going to Loyola College at the time, studying political science and starting to get into jazz. And one summer, my first summer away from home, I got to have my freedom, and I was there living, had my own place. I was practicing and looking up in, what do you call it? Those big books. People put them on a chair, and kids could sit on them if they was too high, or had information in it. Oh, phone book. And I looked up, and there was Jazz House West. So I walked, and I kept walking and walking. Well, I didn't know much about Baltimore, but I knew when I saw the Beltway that I had gone too far. I walked back. This gentleman was working at the record store, and he started telling me about where the music was in town. And again, same deal. A few years later, worked up the nerve to ask him to play and make some music together. And he said, okay. He's a very soft-spoken person when you talk to him, but you hear the power and just the musicianship that he brings to the bandstand on the drums. And he's also an accomplished composer. As you will hear in our second set, he's an amazing vocalist. And the last time we played in New York, I shared that he's also a baker, kind of on the side. And he said, man, after the show, someone came up and placed an order. So all you with a sweet tooth, come and see him afterwards, and welcome Mr. Eric Kennedy on the drums. Eric Kennedy. Start that beat. We're going to close out this first set with one more original from the album, and this is called New Jersey '88. You heard me talk about the the train running through town, and I had a wonderful childhood. Riding bikes and building remote control cars, and playing in street stickball. When I tell people about stickball, invariably I get some New Yorkers that come up to me and say, "Oh, I played stickball back in the day." So we can have a sign-up sheet for that later on too. I remember playing ping pong in the garage, Miss Pac-Man. Video games were just starting to come in. So this composition tries to capture that kind of joyous spirit and how that part of me is now in my neighborhood for the last 20 plus years. You'll even hear a little bit of a theme that will kind of refer back to Miss Pac-Man. We hope you enjoy this composition, which is called New Jersey 88, Ode to the 80s. Bollenback on guitar, Kris Funn on the bass, Eric Kennedy on the drums, and my name is Todd Marcus on bass clarinet. We hope you enjoy the music. You know that this is part of our album. We've been doing a tour. We were in Connecticut, we were in Buffalo, and Cleveland, and Frostburg, Maryland, and tonight we wrap up our tour here with you in New York. We have copies of the CD available. We would love you to take a copy home. We'll let you know that the CDs sell for $16. If you can do more, that or more to support the arts, we're grateful. If if you were thinking about walking, but thinking maybe I'll take a cab and that's kind of expensive and funds are low, we'll let you name your own price. So we don't want you, basic bottom line, we don't want you going home without a copy of the album. Hey, big thank you to Patty Prasada Rao over there at our table, our seat table. She's been doing booking work with me for about a year now, doing a wonderful job and helping us through this tour. Thank you, Patty. And thank you all of you for being here. We hope you stick around for our next set. We've got all different music. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Dizzy's, for having us. All the folks in front of house and behind the scenes. We'll be back in a little bit.
Welcome to Dizzy's Jazz at Lincoln Center. My name is Patty Prasada Rao, and I'm the booking assistant for Todd Marcus Jazz, and I'm here just to tell you a little bit about what you're going to experience tonight. Todd Marcus is a composer and arranger, a bass clarinet extraordinaire artist, and he also doubles by day as a community activist. Todd has been living in the community in West Baltimore by the name of Sandtown. And I don't know if many of you have heard of our neighborhood. Most likely, very few of you had, especially before the year of 2015, when one of our community residents by the name of Freddie Gray died in police custody. After Freddie Gray's death, actually on the day of his funeral, there was an uprising, civil unrest in our community to represent not just what happened to Freddie Gray, but what has been happening for quite some time, the issues that are related to poverty, many of them, issues of injustice. Todd will be telling you a little bit more about those issues today. Tonight we are showcasing an album called On These Streets, A Baltimore Story. It's an album which tells the story of our neighborhood of Sandtown, including both the challenges and the joys of our neighborhood. And we wanted to let you know that tonight there will be something a little bit unusual at a jazz concert. You will hear some interludes, audio interludes, before a few of the pieces to give you some context for what you're going to hear. They will help describe something about the song that is to follow. So I invite you to enjoy the evening, to enter into the story of Sandtown, and please put your hands together and welcome Todd Marcus Quintet.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. As Patty said, the other half of my life, separate from being a jazz-based clarinetist, a rare identity in the jazz world, is running a community nonprofit that I met the founder of 20 plus years ago. And so we're dealing with poverty-related challenges in our community. And the first interlude you're going to hear is the voice of our founder talking about our neighborhood, talking about our community organization, and we hope you enjoy this kind of multimedia presentation tonight and the portrait we try to share of our community in Baltimore.
Behind me is the 1300 block of Stockton Street, and that's where I was raised back in the day.
It's a little bit different than when you grew up, though.
A whole lot different. We would have picnics at the square up here many years ago. Of course, you're seeing a lot of vacancy around here. This community had a population of 40,000 when I was growing up, and that was in the 50s, and it's now down to 10,000.
We serve here because there's so much suffering in this community, because there's so much need here in this community. Our community having kids not graduating from school, selling drugs, people in the community without decent, affordable homes, returning citizens from incarceration, going back to jail. Things had to be done, and so we had to put action to the words that we preached. And so our outward journey allowed us to start programs such as Martha's Place, which supports women who are suffering with their addiction of drugs and alcohol. Jubilee Arts, which supports our young people and old so that they may express themselves artistically. Also, Strength to Love Too, which supports returning citizens from incarceration. And these programs are what help us in poverty in the communities of Sandtown, Winchester. There's much joy in that, much hope that we ourselves are the ones who bring the change. And so I'm at the place where I feel that Jesus would be if he was alive. He is alive, but he's alive in me, and that's why we serve here.
Thank you, everyone. If you are just joining us and didn't hear the first set, we're trying to show these multiple aspects of our neighborhood in Baltimore, the positives that don't get covered by media, that you won't hear about unless you come and spend time. And our neighborhood is not alone in this. So many of our communities in America are like this, and so we share that composition with you, an intersection change, where you hear from our founder talking about the things we're doing, the way we're fighting for our neighborhood amidst our challenges. And one of the things that I feel is a beautiful thing, had a chance, back when we still had snow in Baltimore, it's been a while, you know, I tell the story, my dad died a couple of years ago, and one of the things I got was this snowblower, and I thought, I am going to be the champion of the block. This snow comes, I'm going to clear it, everybody be saying, ta-da! And it just stopped snowing. But back when it did, we had a snowstorm, and my wife is a teacher, and she said, "Oh, stay home. I got the day off." And I went to work for a little bit, and then came back, and seeing the beauty of the snow covering our neighborhood, even parts of our neighborhood like the vacant buildings or some of our trash covered lots, and just the way that snow blankets things and gives that peace and serenity amidst some of the grind and the challenges we have on a daily basis. I thought, I want to put a composition about that. So this next one embodies it. It's going to feature our pianist, Bruce Barth, and it's called Covered in Snow. Thank you very much. We want to feature some more of the audio interludes from the album on this next composition. And this one came about in 2015. I shared on our first set that in 2015, when we had the unrest after the death of Freddie Gray, we had a lot of intensity. There was the unrest at Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue, which became the epicenter when CVS was set on fire. And there was the unknown of how bad might things be in our neighborhood and in our city. There was immediate thoughts to 1968 and the riots in our country and in Baltimore after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And so it was around that time that, amidst this tragedy in our neighborhood taking place, I was celebrating an album that I had just put out with my 9-piece group. And it was a radio station in Hawaii that had been playing it and really liked it and said, hey, can you record yourself saying, "Aloha, this is Todd Marcus, and you're listening to Hawaii Public Radio." I thought, cool, people listen to my music on Hawaii. And so I started to record that little thing, and I couldn't get through it because the helicopters were constantly circling overhead. And at first I thought, oh, no problem. Each take after take, I started getting more frustrated, more restless. And I started just getting tense. And it had me thinking about a study that I had seen years ago that talked about how folks are living in communities dealing with poverty often exhibit post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And, living in my neighborhood for 20 plus years now, I've seen that firsthand. A little thing, just for me, I give you that example of trying to record that audio interlude, but for my neighbors that have been lifelong, and then we are a historically African-American community, and folks that are dealing with compounded dynamics of racial inequity in our country, whether it be police brutality or poor education in our communities of color. And so I thought, okay, this is something that I want to try to capture in music. As artists, we try to take the challenges and oftentimes find some kind of inner picture, inner beauty. Well, this tries to capture that intensity. We hope you enjoy our portrait. It's called PTSD in the Hood. Thank you, everyone. I want to tell you about our wonderful musicians. On piano, a gentleman that I've been listening to for years, had the pleasure to work with for a few years now. You hear the elegance, the grace, the power, the passion in his playing. Please welcome Bruce Barth on the piano. Bruce Barth. On guitar, a gentleman that is, boy, he just brings so much to any project that he's in. You hear not only his soloing playing, his ensemble playing, but then the textures that he brings, the creativity. Please welcome Paul Bollenback on the guitar. Paul Bollenback. On bass, a gentleman that is in quite high demand, and so he lives just down the street in D.C., but he's out and about quite often. I wish I got a chance to play with him more often. You hear his creativity, all the wonderful things he does. You hear the ensemble parts, but you hear all these ideas and ideas going on, and at the same time, it grooves so hard. Please give it up for Kris Funn on the bass. Kris Funn. And our other painter on the drums, doing the same thing, taking the written music, giving all this creativity and colors and shaping and creating these waves that we soar on. Please welcome on drums, and then you'll hear us in a moment on vocals as well, Eric Kennedy. Eric Kennedy. Thank you. So we've got a couple more here for you, and one of the things that I felt was so important to share about our community was one of its strengths, which has long been church. And in addition to the spiritual nurturing that church provides, in communities like ours, in African-American communities, church has also long been a very strong social force as well. We know well the history, the legacy of the church in the social and the civil rights movement in this country. Folks don't often think as much, and for me it was a blessing to get to learn firsthand from talking to community members, talking to community residents and neighbors, the degree to which church, especially during segregation, oppression, slavery, was critical as far as providing those things that were services not available to African Americans otherwise: legal support, educational aspects, transportation. And so it was, so I knew that any Sunday, the number of churches in our neighborhood where you hear, one right behind me, where I hear the pastor preaching and I hear the musicians going to town, and church musicians, minor church musicians, it's amazing what they do. A good friend of mine from the neighborhood is an organist, and when I first moved to the neighborhood would take me around, going to different church services and hearing the creativity, taking a hymn that maybe you know from hundreds of years ago and giving it this bold, fresh colors and reharmonizations. And so we try to do that with this composition. It's an old hymn called I Surrender All, and you're going to hear us start with a real conservative treatment and let it soar from there. Please put your hands together for Eric Kennedy and I Surrender All.
Amen. Praise the Lord. Amen. Testimony time in the house. Amen.
All to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him surrender humbly at his feet. I bow. Worldly pleasures all forsaken. Take me, Jesus, take me now. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all.
can go back to, I'll say, my teenage years, and Pennsylvania Avenue was the mecca. It was the hub for all of our African-American singers and dancers and jazz musicians.
Pennsylvania Avenue was a part of the Chitlin circuit. Entertainers would go to a part at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. They would come here to the Royal Theater in Baltimore, Maryland, and they would go to the Apollo in New York. And those places of entertainment were called the Chitlin circuit. And all the African-American talent in the United States would be a part of that circuit.
Everybody from everywhere would come, and the Royal would be packed. That was the place. The Avenue was the place to be. There were lights, there were stores, there were people stopping, talking, and mingling with one another. There was love.
You know, there were clubs all up and down here. I used to go to see all the shows at the Royal. The Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Fletcher Henderson, Cab Calloway. Bands playing everywhere. Musicians didn't have to worry about work, plenty of work.
After the riots, everything began to go down. What was lively now was dead, and it was hurtful because the place where people had a place to go, now there wasn't.
Thank you so much for being with us, everyone. That's going to do it for us tonight. We hope you enjoy the music. We hope that our work does its justice of getting a portrait that transcends challenges of our neighborhood. If you'd like to learn a little more about the community nonprofit that I've been a part of for these many years, visit intersectionofchange.org. For more about me and my work as a musician, it's toddmarcusjazz.com. And if you'd like a CD, we're doing a CD release show. We've been on the road, Connecticut, Buffalo, Cleveland, Frostburg, Maryland, and now we wrap up tonight. It's been wonderful playing with all these musicians, and we want you to take the music home. We've got the CDs available here, just off the stage left, and they're normally $16. We say if you can do that, or feel in the mood to do more and support the arts, we're grateful. If funds are low, we'll let you name your own price. And the reason is because we don't want you going home without a copy of the album tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you very much to everyone at Dizzy's for having us. This is a wonderful place to be. I love seeing music here. I love the chance to perform here. Thank you, Dizzy's, to all of you staff here in the house, those who do the booking and the promoting. Thank you so much. Thank you to Patty Prasada Rao for her work putting all this tour together for us. And we hope to see you out and about again. Thank you, everyone. Bruce Barth, piano. Kris Funn, bass. Paul Bollenback, guitar. Eric Kennedy on drums. My name's Todd Marcus. I'm bass clarinet. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.